Hello, Facebook. So I'm doing a follow-up to my McDonald's thread yesterday. I actually don't want to talk about McDonald's. I don't want to talk about their gendered toys, all that. Said my piece, done, not really changing my mind. Turns out it's not their policy. They're supposed to stop saying it. And so dude was out of pocket anyway. What I want to talk about was the interactions that took place. And just like I was at that McDonald's, saw an opportunity and was in education mode, even though it wasn't your education mode, it was my education mode. I'm using that thread because it gives people an opportunity to go back and read it and see what was taking place and see how not to show up like that in the world anymore, particularly with marginalized groups, particularly with people of color, and especially with Black folks and Indigenous folks. So I chose to educate someone on a particular issue. My education used the words vagina and penis, which, hello, pick up a biology book. Those are the words. Those are the words I have my children use when they're talking about those body parts. We do not create shame around those body parts. So quite frankly, if anybody's saying that I created shame for him by the use of those words, no. His mama created shame for him by teaching him that you don't use those words. I used them in context specifically to how and asking why they were gendering the toy. It was a little smart aleck. I ain't gonna lie. It was plenty smart aleck. I'm good. But it was in context, used correctly, no shame involved. Unless you've been taught by society, back to society and the BS, to fly away from those words and that those words are shameful. But I'm not here for that. And so some folks would not have handled the situation I did. But the key thing I want to talk about here is tone policing and the tendency for white women to try to police the way that Black folks show up in this world. And what I want you to walk out of this discussion with is that I need you to do you and let me do me. And you could add and say, hey, this is also an idea to do. But the idea of telling somebody that they are showing up totally incorrectly is really just about how you would show up and who says you set the standard. And that is really what tone policing is all about. And I rarely have people of color showing up to tell me how to be in this world. Now, they might tell me what they think. They might tell me lots of stuff, but not how for me to show up in this world. And what's the missing foundation for many white folks is that you don't get the number of transgressions that takes place for people of color, gay people, people of non-Christian religions, people of different genders on the daily, if not the hourly. And so when you jump into my 99th transgression for the day and you're like, ooh, that could have been handled a little more nicely. That is tone policing. So let me give you an analogy. So if any of you are parents, you get up every morning and you're like, I'm taking my 10 deep breaths. I'm getting my yoga done today. Maybe I'm not a yoga fan, but whatever. And I'm going to be calm, cool, and collected with my kids. And on that first transgression, you're like, sweetheart, can you come back over here? Is that really the best way to handle that situation? And on the fifth one, you're like, look at me. Could we think of a better way to phrase that, honey? And by the 10th transgression, we're like, please come here and handle this. But around 6 o'clock in the afternoon, by the 99th transgression, we're like, get your butt over here and come fix what I told you to fix, whatever the situation is. And you're like, darn it, here I am again, and I'm yelling and whatever. So that is what it's like for a person of color or any one of the marginalized groups on not only the daily, the weekly, the monthly, the yearly, the lifetime, right? We try, we start every new period, every new day with like, peace, love, and happiness. I am loving the world. I am going to be a better human in this place. And, but after transgression, you don't always have the patience, the grace, and the love to respond in the, hi, well, can I talk to you for a second about how you may not recognize the impact of that statement you had on a Black person and the realities of a Black person's life? Can we chat about that a little bit? Because, y'all, I do that a lot. Anybody who's part of my anti-racism group here in Evanston will see Sometimes I show up like with a thesis on why this is a problem, and lots of solutions and scenarios and suggestions for how people can show up differently. And sometimes I show up with petty. It's because by the 99th transgression, you don't get to demand of me how I show up and handle it, right? Because you are not dealing with the stress from the 98th other one. It'd be like if your spouse came home on the 99th transgression, saw you yelling and said, well, I really would prefer if you didn't handle the kids like that. You would want to tell them, you would chuck the towel, walk out the door and be like, you stay home with them then. Not that I stay home with my kids, but so you can't take one snapshot and then decide you're just going to formulate a whole how-to on how white folk would do it differently. So suggestions around this. Please feel free to add. In addition, one can do X. Have you thought about also doing X? And that needs to be also, not doing what they're doing differently. Like somebody on that thread yesterday was like, have you tried contacting the LGBT group for McDonald's and maybe they could take it up? And I was like, brilliant! Because I was just going through the regular customer service channels and maybe that's a different avenue. That's helping. That's doing something additional as opposed to, hey, do it my way because my way is the right way. And yeah, I think that's it. I just want you to think about all the other stressors that are put and microaggressions that are against marginalized groups that you don't have to experience. So when this is only your 5th transgression this week, and you could jump into it like, Pollyanna, let's figure out how to do this. Like, let's be graceful. Good for you. It's called privilege. Something to think about.